I saw a little video clip that I thought would work well for this message to start with, but I'm not going to play it. I'm going to kind of reenact it. I want you to imagine you're coming along and somebody's on their phone and you kind of overhear a little piece of conversation there. And you overhear somebody talking, saying this: "I can't do anything right. No wonder my boss won't promote me and my wife doesn't respect me." What are your thoughts if you hear that? Compare it to this. You walk by and you see the same person. Instead, they're saying this: "God is not finished with me yet. I can be the person He created me to be at work and at home." That kind of a different conversation? How about this? Listen to this one. "I cannot believe he's acting that way. What a jerk." Okay, compare it with this statement: "He must be having a really hard day. Maybe God put me here to make a difference in his life." Two very different statements with words, right? Try one more. "I just cannot stop doing this. I'm so frustrated with myself. I will always be this way." Compare it to walking by and the person on the phone saying this: "I can do this through the strength of Jesus Christ. He will help me to overcome." And Miguel is at the front imitating me. Thank you, Miguel. We're talking through the month of January on succeeding in the Christian life by seeing little things be different. We talked about thoughts, we're going to talk about words today, we're going to talk about some actions. We're going to continue with this idea that small things, such as changing a few words in our vocabulary, can make a big difference in our lives. 23 years ago this week, two Swiss men by the name of Bertrand Piccard and Wim Verstraeten, and I'm probably not saying that right, set out to do something quite remarkable. They wanted to be the first people who would go around the entire planet in a hot air balloon. And they set it out. They did a lot of work, and they got sponsors, they got companies to look after them. This was going to be a big scientific venture. They spent $1.5 million building a hot air balloon from scratch with a pressurized cabin that they would be in that could go right up to the jet stream in the upper atmosphere, could catch them, and would take them right around the world. It was a high-tech masterpiece. It had solar panels on it to give them some electricity. They had this pressurized cabin so they could survive in upper atmosphere. They lifted off 23 years ago this week. And they got almost to the height that they were supposed to get to when they suddenly realized they could smell kerosene. Now, kerosene was, of course, what they were using to heat the balloon. They shouldn't be able to smell it there. This was not a good sign. They immediately got in contact with their mission control, and they said, "This is not going to work. You've got to drop down to a lower altitude where you can hopefully get to land," because they were out over the Mediterranean Sea at this point. "Get out over to land and hopefully find a place where they could safely get to." The kerosene kept coming though. And it got to the place where inside the cabin it was getting dangerous, that they were worried about the fumes overwhelming them. So they realized they were going to need to ditch over the Mediterranean Sea. And so they did. And they lost this $1.5 million balloon that they had spent all this time building. They did an investigation as to what went wrong. Of course, you're going to spend that much money and everything's going to go wrong. You want to know what went wrong, right? Mm-hmm. The problem was the failure of a little clamp that cost $1.
Oh.
A little clamp that cost $1. It failed. And as a result, the kerosene started to leak into the cabin. It is remarkable that a little $1 clamp can make such a big difference. It doesn't take much for something little to undermine something that is great. You know, God intends the Christian life to be a triumphant journey, but small things can sink us pretty quickly, can't it? Something small like the tongue. Something small like words that come out of our mouth. They can scuttle a lot of God's great plans in our lives. And when we set our hearts right with God, small things like the tongue can also lead to great victory. See, the news is not all bad today. It is small things that can make a big difference. Last week, I talked about, now granted, last week was, well, it was cold. And we didn't have very many people here on Sunday. But I talked about how our thought lives, the things that we say to ourselves, are what I call self-talk, which is the things that we say to ourselves as we're thinking to ourselves. Those things can play such a big difference in our lives. If we tell ourselves that we cannot do it, well, guess what? We won't. If we go around telling ourselves, you know what? No one likes me, we will find evidence of that. But if we learn to focus on the things of God, the good things, it's amazing that the difference that can make. Our thought life focuses on either God or struggles. I'm going to hit up another thing that focuses our hearts that may seem like a small thing, but boy, it makes a difference. And that's the things that leave our mouths. The things we say have a remarkable way of shaping our lives. Sometimes we might think about, yeah, the things I say might reflect something that's deeper in my heart. Sometimes we might think that, yeah, the things I say are going to play a major role in other people's lives, either for good or for bad. I'm going to tell you, according to scriptures, as I read them, the things that come out of our mouths also shape our lives. They make a difference in the direction we are going. They change us in very powerful ways. If our words are negative, our attitudes very quickly become negative. If our words are gossipy, our focus is on humanity. If our words tend towards being hurtful, we are no good to the kingdom of God. However, our words can also be a great source of hope, not just for others, for ourselves. It can change ourselves in powerful ways. There's an old story of a Greek philosopher who told his servant, I want you to bring me the best meal you can possibly bring me. The best meal. Now I got to tell you, what the servant brought him, I'm not sure I'd want. He brought him a tongue. I don't know. There's just something about tongue that I just can't do it. I don't know. That just is not a meal I can eat. It just somehow, I don't know, the thought of it. Anyways, this servant brought him tongue, and this philosopher said, well, okay, I've had tongue before. Why this? And he said this, it's the best of all dishes, because with it we may bless and communicate happiness, dispel sorrow, remove despair, cheer the faint-hearted, inspire the discouraged, and say 100 other things to uplift mankind. Not true? So then this old ancient Greek philosopher turned to his servant and says, so what would you have brought me if I told you to bring the worst meal you possibly could? And the servant very wisely said, well, probably the same thing. I don't know who would ask for the worst meal you could possibly bring. It is the worst, the servant said, because with it we may curse and break humanity's heart. Destroy reputations, promote discord and strife, set families, communities, and nations at war with each other. A well-crafted speech can change the momentum of history. An ill-spoken word can tear down beyond what we might comprehend. A lie, a flattery, a word of gossip, a self-serving declaration, those things can destroy, but a word of praise, a statement of hope, a prayer, a truth when truth is being ignored, those things do much good. We're going to come back to, actually we're going to go to Proverbs first, where we read, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. It's a remarkable little passage. It is a statement of truly where God works with our lives, with our mouths. Death and life. It's pretty stark, isn't it? And those who love it will eat its fruit. Who eats the fruits here? What's this proverb talking about? It's basically saying, those who love it for good or love it for bad will eat its fruits. In other words, the things that come out of our mouth also come back into our souls. They come back into who we are. They help guide us. They lead us. They lead us in all sorts of intriguing directions. That's basically what James was after in that passage I read earlier when he says this, if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he's a perfect man. Any of us want to claim this? Able also to bridle his whole body. If we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. In other words, a bit in the mouth of a horse, it controls a rather large animal, right? That's what James is trying to say. That's the same with our tongue. How do we control ourselves? Well, partially it's the words out of our mouths. Then he goes on, he gives the whole bit about ship rudders. I chose to focus on the bits. I thought that might mean more to us than boats. But he continues, so also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among the members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Harsh stuff. Our words reflect our inner character, but they also shape who we are. They steer us. That's why he goes on to talk about bits and rudders and things like this, because the things out of our mouth, they steer very much who we are. We are gossipy. If we say something that we hope someone never hears, something that we hope will never get out in public, and maybe it never does, I'm going to tell you it is still dangerous because of what it does to me. Last week I talked about listening to inputs that we put into our thought lives. The words I speak are inputs into my own life. When it speaks, it drives who I am. I'd like you to think of the last 24 hours. Last day. The words you have spoken, have they been things that bring glory to God? I'm going to guess all of us will look and say, well, there's things that were not so bad. And probably all of us will come up with something saying, yeah, I probably would be happy if God didn't hear that. James talks about it. He says, Who among us is perfect? Because if you got this figured out, you're perfect. In other words, all of us have room to grow, is what the Bible has to say. In the last 24 hours, have your words been like this verse in Proverbs, going back to it? Are they words of death or words of life? Are the words we give words that take away from the glory of God, or do they give glory to God? Are they destructive to my own soul, or are they words that bring hope? The story was told of this giant of a man. He was 6'10", rather tall. He was huge. He had a scowl to him. He just had a face that looked angry and looked like he was always ready just to rip you apart. He walked into a McDonald's, pounded his fist on the counter, and looked at this little tiny teenage girl who was behind the counter and said, "I want a half a Big Mac." And she kind of, "What?" Said, "I want a half a Big Mac and I want it now." And this poor girl was looking at this very scary looking man, trying to figure out, well, how do I sell a half a hamburger? So she started walking back to her manager, said, "Just wait a minute," and started waiting back to her manager to go talk to him, without realizing this rather big, scary man was following her and followed her behind the counter. And she got back to the manager and said, "There is a big klutz out there who is dumber than lead, and he's ordered half a Big Mac." At that moment, she realized that he had followed her. And she quickly added, "And this gentleman wants the other half." Do you know the problem with that story is? She might have backpedaled a little bit, but you know what? God doesn't want us to backpedal, because the things we say lead to the glory of God, or they lead away from the glory of God. When we talk about other people, when we talk about God, when we talk about things that are unwholesome or destructive, all those things lead us away from God's glory. Not just the other people, but they lead us away. Because death and life are in the power of the tongue. And those who love it, whether for good or for bad, will eat its fruits. We bring it as part of us. Got in the bulletin a quote that talks about the fact that words are dynamite. And dynamite can be used for great good, can't it? It can also be used for very destructive things. And if you don't use dynamite properly, well, you're going to suffer the consequences, right? Well, that's true of our words. So we're going to come to some words that focus our attention the right way. A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. Man, that's kind of a hard little phrase, isn't it? I'm glad there's good news in this. A gentle tongue is a tree of life. Aren't you glad there's good news here? But there's also some bad news. And that is the fact that we can lose so much by letting our tongues go the wrong direction. I'm supposed to have another slide here that I don't think is here that talks about, from Proverbs 18, that our words can be a sword. Swords can do great damage. Destructive words can be very powerful. You know what? If 10 people come up to me and say, "Good job," and one person comes up to me and says, "Man, that was terrible," who am I going to be thinking of? Which comment am I going to be remembering, right? I'm going to be thinking about the one negative. Why? Because negative tends to be a spiral down. We hear negative, we think negative, and it just goes on and on and on. Negative breeds negative. Positive is much harder because it's not as natural. This word is this verse is a harsh reminder. That word perverseness can be translated a bunch of different ways. It can be crude, or harsh, or even dishonest. All those words fit into this. A lie that says good job, by the way, when there wasn't, well, that's not a good word either. But a word that is truth and hard, that is spoken prayerfully and kindly and honestly, that makes a big difference too. I want to give you a secret phrase that might help us to understand how words change us, negative words in particular. I want to give you a phrase, and that is the way I want it. I want you to think of this phrase, because what I want us to do, if we're going to do a little experiment, I'm going to give you some negative things that I want to say, and then I want to add this to it, because this really reflects us. I want us to add to it because it reminds us that our words that we speak about other people or about situations in life are really not about that person. They're about us. And so they change our hearts. How about this? Let me give you a couple examples. Joe over there. I cannot believe how pig-headed he is. And that is the way I want it. If you catch it, it changes it from that. It's really about that person to it's about me. It's about me. Those folks are so stuck up. And that's the way I want it. You know, it really helps us to understand that when we're judging somebody else like that, we're trying to find evidence of it. Trying to find proof of it. It is the way that I want it. How about this one? I always seem to fail. And that's the way I want it. Again, trying to find evidence within my own heart for something I'm trying to prove. I'm going to tell you, when we speak in negatives, it leads us down a very hard, dark path. If we were to say this phrase after every time we said something about ourselves or about somebody else, it would emphasize to us that, hey, this is really more about me than it is about anyone else. It really is even me trying to prove to myself that my preconceptions are right, that some of the emotions that I feel that may be against the things of God, they're right. I'm trying to prove things. That is the way I want it. And I'm going to tell you, when we start talking negatively all the time, it leads us on a destructive, life-taking path. But I've got good news. I got good news. There is hope. Because graceful talk changes everything. Let's look at Proverbs 16. It says this: gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the whole soul and health to the body. Now, we have to understand something here. In ancient Israel, they really felt that they liked honey. They really liked honey. And they thought it was quite nutritious because, you know, it tasted good. So it's got to be nutritious, right? If you eat a lot of honey, it boosts one's morale. It makes you feel better. They thought there was something very special about its nutritional value. And gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body. It is something that makes things good. You know, a lot of times we go through sermons about the tongue, or you read books about it and it'll tell you, maybe we're better off keeping our mouths shut. Do you know that is not biblical? As I read this, not biblical. Think before you speak, absolutely. Certainly. But we do need to speak. And speak of things that are pleasant, polite, honest, thought through. At times, it is absolutely critical that we speak. And as I read these verses, do you know what? The words we speak can bring life. Sometimes those life-giving words, by the way, might be unpleasant for someone else to hear. I'm not saying everybody's always going to like everything we say, but when they're done in a way that is not critical, with love, with concern, with prayer, they can provide life not just for that other person, but they can provide life for ourselves. In this proverb here, the intent is not that gracious thoughts are like honeycomb. They're not gracious well wishes. They're gracious words. They are things that are spoken. Things that keep me engaged with another person in a positive way. As you go through the Psalms, a lot of them are written by King David. King David, as he writes a lot of his Psalms, usually he writes them at hard moments, when things are not going well. And it is remarkable as you go through the Psalms, how many of them are, God, can you pay attention down here? Things are not going right. And he gives a little bit of complaint, but he gives it to God. God's a good one to complain to. If we have a complaint, complain to God. That's biblical. But then, as you go through them all, after he's done complaining, then it almost invariably, with one or two exceptions, leads to praise and worship and positive things that he has to say. Because those are the things, those words of worship are ones that bring life. There is a tremendous illustration that we find in an Old Testament book called Ezekiel. And there's a famous story. This book is one of the hardest in the Bible to read. I tried to do a sermon series on it a few years ago. Man, that was a struggle, I'll tell you. There's a lot of nuggets of truth in there, but it's a hard one. But it's got a great illustration halfway through the book of this prophet being led by God to a valley in which he looks out and there's all these skeletons. Dry bones is the way it's described. And he looks out over this valley and he sees all these dry bones, and God says to speak to them. And the bones come to life. You know, that is exactly what words can do. Bring life where we find death. That's what happens when we speak in a godly way. Our words matter. Small things make a big difference. Small words of discouragement kill, but small words of hope change the very soul. When we are positive, when we are hopeful in our words, it makes a difference. I want to take us to one last verse, Ephesians chapter 4, which says this: "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." We at times may think our words don't really hurt. We may think a lot of our words don't really matter, but my question is this: do they build you up in the kingdom of God? Small things, big difference. So the encouragement here is just watch our words. Watch yourself through this coming week and catch those moments. Because the way at the beginning, I read from James, James says, anybody who controls the tongue is perfect. With this implication, who does it? None of us. We all have room to grow. So catch ourselves. When we catch ourselves talking in a way that's gossip. In other words, talking about another person in a negative way. Or catch ourselves, we start to brag and talk in a boastful way. Or catch ourselves whenever we're speaking in a way that is hurtful. Whatever the case may be, catch ourselves in those moments and change it deliberately. And instead speak in a way that builds people up. That we catch ourselves in a conversation with somebody in which we're ripping somebody else apart. Stop and pray for them. Man, that makes a difference. Or when we're talking in a way that may be dishonest or crude or something like that, catching ourselves. Praying to God and then worshiping God. Our words matter. Not just for everybody else, our words make a big difference in our own spiritual journeys as we journey towards God. Let our words be that guide that takes us towards Jesus. Being deliberate to build not just ourselves, but building other people up. Encouraging words, helping words, grace-giving words. It is a remarkable difference and the amount of encouragement our own souls can get from speaking in a way that brings glory to God. So we're going to sing a song of commitment to close us off. I invite us to join together as we sing the hymn, "Oh, to be like Thee," hymn number 231.